Chemicals and Health Branch, and I'll be moderating this webinar on mining data from National Action Plans for AsGM. The webinar is brought to you by UNEP, UNIDO, Minamata Convention Secretariat, and the Global Mercury Partnership. And we're really excited for this webinar because it's going to introduce to you some new information, new data that's been gathered from the national action plans that have been published already. And there's a lot more of that data to come as the national action plans continue to be published. So this is going to be some new data and a new tool to explore it. And so our program today, first of all, Richard is going to come back to us and going to give some opening remarks on the Minamata Convention and National Action Plan, setting the scene on the NAPs and why they're so important and what they can teach us. Then we'll hear from my colleague at UNEP, Malgorzata Stillo, who will give the global overview of the latest trends and priorities that we've found from studying the published NAPs. Then we'll hear from a perspective from the Nigeria Ministry of Environment. Alumbunmi Alusana will present some experience from Nigeria on translating data into policy for AsGM. And then we'll have a question and answer time at the end that will be moderated by Jerome Stuckey from UNIDO. And we'll make sure that we have enough time at the end so that we can answer those questions that you have that come up from the presentations. As Richard said, please use the chat to record your questions, and we'll collect those and have them ready for the Q&A session. So I don't want to hold everything up anymore. I'm going to turn it over now back to Richard for some opening remarks on Minamata Convention and NAPs for AsGM.
Hey, thanks so much, Ken. So I'm back, and then as Ken said, I'll be providing you with an opening remark or an overview, at least at this stage, for the benefit of those who are joining us for the first time and getting acquainted with the Minamata Convention and its relation with AsGM and also the National Action Plans. Next slide, please. So here's a quick overview of the process in terms of the convention and where we're at. In 2 weeks time, we'll have the second segment of the COP4 in Bali, Indonesia, from March 21 to 25. Next slide, please. And right now we have 137 parties as of, sorry for that typo there, or there's a formatting issue there, as of March 7, 2022, for the Minamata Convention. So we are going strong, and we hope to see more parties or more countries become parties to the convention in the next year or so. Next slide, please. Here you have an overview of the Minamata Convention control, which is the convention addresses the whole life cycle of mercury. From the slide, you will see the various articles pertaining to the specific articles on life cycle stages of mercury. I won't go into the details of this slide. You can look at this and review it at your leisure after the presentation. Now, next slide, please. A critical issue for the convention is the global anthropogenic mercury emissions of mercury. And as of 2018, as you will note in the slide in front of you, emissions from artisanal small-scale gold mining account for 38% of global emissions. Next slide, please. Here you'll see an image or a chart that depicts the mercury emissions from AsGM based on the global mercury assessment data. And the two largest to your left will be, as you will see on the slide, is Indonesia and Peru. But that nonetheless does not say that they are the only emitters. But this is sort of, this image provides you an overview of the magnitude of the problem that the global community is facing and the need for collaboration and response with regard to AsGM. Next slide, please. So under the convention, in Article 1, the objective is to protect human health and the environment from the anthropogenic emissions and releases of mercury and mercury compounds. As I mentioned, the convention covers the entire life cycle of mercury. and included in that is use of mercury in AsGM. So how does the convention deal with AsGM? Next slide, please. In Article 7, then that Article 7 is the main provision of the convention that covers small-scale gold mining, and it applies to small-scale, artisanal and small-scale gold mining and processing of gold using mercury amalgamation. Now, parties with AsGM that use mercury must take steps to reduce and, where feasible, eliminate the use and the emissions of mercury from that sector. Now, parties who determine that AsGM, which is more than insignificant, within its territory, must do the following: develop and implement a national action plan, submit the NAP to the Secretariat, review every 3 years after the entry into force or after notification to the Secretariat, whichever is later. And of course, as I mentioned, provide a review of every 3 years of progress of the NAP. Next slide, please. So in Annex C, you will find contents of the national action plans. And these are as follows: national objectives and reduction targets, actions to eliminate the worst case practices, steps to facilitate the formalization or regulation of the AsGM sector, baseline estimates of the quantities of mercury used and practices employed, strategies for promoting the reduction of emissions and releases of and exposure to mercury in AsGM. Next slide, please. Strategies for managing the trade and preventing mercury diversion to AsGM, strategies for involving stakeholders in implementation and continuing NAP development, public health strategies, strategies to prevent exposure, strategies for information, and schedule of NAP implementation. Now, once these NAPs are submitted, next slide, please, it will be reviewed and uploaded and made available on the web. So here you have a slide showing a screen grab of the current national action plans that are now in the Minamata Convention website. So I hope that overview was helpful. Thank you very much for listening, and I turn the floor or the mic over back to Ken.
Thanks, Richard. Great overview. I will then hand over the floor to my colleague Malgorzata Stillo. Take it away, Gosha.
Thank you very much, Ken. And thank you for this great scene setting, Richard. Now we can dig into some data that and information that the National Action Plan for AsGM contain. And I would like to show you some global overview and latest trends. So here we can see that countries, 41 countries that have started their National Action Plan project. Out of these 41 countries, 16, they are depicted in blue, have already submitted their National Action Plan document to the Minamata Secretariat, and they are available online on the website that Richard was just mentioning. And out of these 16 NAP documents that are publicly available, we have extracted data, information, qualitative and quantitative information to try to provide a summary, the key information, and as well provide a global trend. So we first look on the national overview of the sector that the NAP document contains. So the national overview is produced by desk and field study and as well by stakeholder consultation. And it provides a baseline information about the latest trends in the sector, in the country. And we have extracted estimated number, quantity of mercury use, estimated quantity of gold production by the AsGM, also if available percentage of gold that was produced with mercury, estimated number of miners as well, if were available in the document, estimated number of women and children involved in the sector, and presence of worst practices. We have also tried to extract and summarize qualitative information, for example, role of women and children, key information about the tailings management, co-occurrence and relationship between large-scale mining and AsGM in the country, if relevant, impacts on the biodiversity, We try to list key location of the AsGM as reported in the NAP document, information on legal status, organization, mercury trade, and health baseline information. Then we looked as well on the strategic part of the National Action Plan document. We extracted information on mercury reduction and elimination targets. And we tried to summarize in 2 sentences or so a key takeaway for strategies to be included, and all the strategies that already Richard was providing us an overview. And we extracted the estimated cost for the NAP implementation. And based on all this information for the 16 countries that have submitted the National Action Plan, we produced exploratory tool that kind of dashboards that can that the user can either see the global trends based on this data from the 16 countries, or explore key data and key figures from each of the countries that have submitted their National Action Plan. For now, I would like just to show you a few graphs summarizing global overview and some trends based on this data extracted from the 16 submitted National Action Plans. So when we talk about mercury, so here we can see a mercury estimated quantity of mercury used by the countries in the color bar. This viola color bar shows you the estimates, mercury use estimates based on the National Action Plan document, versus you have the background mercury estimates that they were in the dark shade color, which were reported in the Global Mercury Assessment in from 2018. And the National Action Plan mercury use estimates are the latest one. They were produced through the field visit, depending on the country, between 2018 to 2021, and versus Global Mercury Assessment as mercury use estimate were produced before that. They're older. However, the difference that you can see here between the estimates might not represent the difference over time of mercury use in the country. It might also provide a new information or different methodology how the data were collected. If we just look, there are some countries, as you see, as Burkina Faso, Guinea, Mali, Madagascar, that the mercury use estimate in the NAP reported are much higher than the one from the Global Mercury Assessment, sometimes even 10-fold higher, like in case of Madagascar. Whereas, for example, in some countries as Ecuador or Democratic Republic of Congo or Sierra Leone, the mercury use estimates are lower, reported in the NAP document versus to what was reported in the Global Mercury Assessment from 2018. If we look just on the 2 case studies, what could be the reason for these differences? In Madagascar, for example, the NAP document have reported a number of very mercury-intensive small-scale dredging operation that results in this increase of mercury use from around 3-4 tons reported in GMA 2018 versus approximately 35 tons from the National Action Plan. Versus in Ecuador, the NAP document has actually indicated that actually 40% of the AsGM gold is only produced using mercury. And this finding result, of course, in the lower mercury use estimate in general, in contrast to what was before reported in the GMA 2008. If we look now on the worst practices, the 4 worst practices as outlined by the Minamata Convention, Annex C, we can see that the most common worst practice reported by the country is open burning of amalgam. 14 out of 16 countries have reported a presence of this practice, versus the least common one is a whole amalgamation. Only 6 countries out of 16 has a reported presence of this practice, versus and 5 countries have actually reported a lack of this presence in their territory, and 5 did not provide, and the other 5 did not provide data on, about that. The burning of amalgam in residential area and cyanide use mercury-containing tailing, they are still a very commonly occurring practice. We see 10 out of 16 countries reported presence of this practice within these territories. Now, when we talk about AsGM community and workforce, out of 16 countries that we extracted data, the estimated AsGM workforce was over 2.5 million people involved over the 16 countries. And the highest number of miners were reported in countries like Mali, Madagascar, Burkina Faso. We have also looked on the reported percentage of women involved in the sector, and the percentage range from 5 to 65%. The highest one reported was in Guinea. 65% of women are involved in the sector, and the lowest percentage was reported in Congo, 5%. We also looked at the workforce in the sector from the perspective of productivity, and we looked on the grams of gold produced per year per miner, and we've seen here that countries such as Ecuador, Laos, Burundi produce a higher quantity of gold per miner, versus countries such as Madagascar or Sierra Leone produce lower quantities of gold per miner per year. This definitely is based on, depends on various factors, as a different extraction and processing methods, the richness of the ore deposits, etc. But it also provides indication of the level of mechanization of the sector in the country. For example, in Ecuador, was estimated to be around 5.5 kilogram per miner per year, which suggests and also is documented in an app document of higher mechanization level, of kind of small scale operation, versus in Madagascar, the average gold produced per miner per year is only 22 grams, suggesting a lower level of mechanization and dependence more on rudimentary methods during the gold extraction and processing, among other factors, of course. And just the last trend that I wanted to show you is talking about mercury, since the main objective of the National Action Plan is to reduce and, where possible, when possible, eliminate the mercury use in the sector. We looked also on the country's commitment and reduction targets of mercury. We can see here on the graph a cumulative amount of mercury over time. So starting baseline is 2021, which based on the 16 countries, the estimated mercury used by those 16 countries were 280 tons of mercury. And if the countries, if the strategies and the targets are met by the countries, by 2025, 44%, 123.5 tons of mercury is programmed to be reduced. By 2030, 81% of that amount, 229 tons, it's committed to be eliminated. And now I just wanted to actually very quickly switch to the online tool. The graphs that I show you just now are the result of the data that we have extracted, and we have produced as well exploratory tool, a dashboard, interactive dashboards that you can use to explore better the data, to understand the data behind the graph that I just showed you. And I think my colleague can also paste a link to this dashboard. So here we can see again the same map that I presented. We have countries in blue that have submitted. So this is the data that's available. For example, we can look on the key summary information like Mercury Use. Oh, apologies. I think it's refreshing. Just a moment. Yes. Key figures like Mercury Use, gold produced, and number of miners. And these dashboards are interactive. You can highlight the country and really quickly look on the numbers for each country. We have then different tabs here that show you different types of data. Here we have AsGM Awareness practices per country, and if the country reported the presence or absence of this practice. And this is a very, I think, interesting and hopefully useful tool where we have extracted also qualitative baseline information, and we can look on the you could be interested in one country, say Burundi, and it summarizes all the baseline information qualitative for one country, or maybe in contrast, you're actually only interested in one particular topic, say health baseline information, to compare how they were reported in different NAP documents for different countries. We did the same thing for the NAP strategies. You can again filter it by country or by strategy, and say you're interested in summaries of all the Mercury trade strategy from different countries. You can easily access it here. The other one you can look again. This is the other representation of the Mercury reduction target when you see the accumulated line, and you can also see exact numbers and first targets to reduce Mercury or eliminate Mercury, and the different lines for different countries. And you have also information about other the key other figures and the link to the NAP document as appearing the Minamata Convention website. So I will stop sharing here. And thank you for your attention. I turn it back to Ken.
Okay, thanks very much, Gosha. I did paste the link in the chat to that dashboard that you showed us at the end of your presentation, so you can take a look there at the link. Again, that's an exploratory visualization. It's sort of a beta version as we work to analyze and make this and generate insights from this data. And also a reminder to put your questions in the chat so that we can cover those in the Q&A session at the end. I see that Patience has already left a question in there, so please go ahead and put your questions in the chat. We can now move on to our next presentation. And now we're going to hear some interesting details from the perspective of Nigeria and the Nigeria National Action Plan. And we're going to hear from Olubunmi Alusana from the Federal Ministry of Environment of Nigeria. So Olubunmi, we will advance the slides, and I will hand over the floor to you for your presentation.
Thank you, Kenneth, and good day to all our participants. The translating data into policy for AsGM case study from Nigeria Now project. The Nigeria Now project was implemented by UNIDO and was jointly executed by 3 ministries: Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Men and State Development, and Federal Ministry of Health. Next slide. The next slide again. Yeah. The national AsGM baseline data gathering process involved the following: the 3 executive agencies engaged consultants. The consultants, in collaboration with these executive agencies, set survey timeline, determine data collection methods, prepare questionnaire, identify enumerators and target audience, and develop training materials for enumerators. The enumerators were trained on data collection methods. Data were collected and submitted for review. Data were reviewed and validated by national stakeholders. Thereafter, the NAP document was developed and validated by national stakeholders. The NAP document was published and launched by policymakers from Federal Ministry of Environment, from Ministry of Health and Ministry of Mines and Steel Development in Nigeria. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. No, go back a little, just a slide before this. Thank you. Data were collected to provide information on the following areas: geographical distribution of AsGM in Nigeria, gold mining and processing information as highlighted in the slide, environmental impact of AsGM activities, health risk. Then data collection method involve interviews, questionnaires, survey, observation, desktop review, and focus group discussion. Next slide, please. Next, okay, thank you. The following steps were taken in translating data into policy for AsGM in Nigeria. Data were validated with appropriate recommendations to address gaps. Data and recommendations were disseminated to policymakers and a technical working group through a policy brief. Policymakers, after due diligence and in close consultation with relevant stakeholders, formulate policies and initiatives as appropriate. And an example of such initiative is the development of the Nigeria Jet Planet Group project entitled Enhancing Formalization and Mercury Free Gold in Nigeria. This was also developed in conjunction with our development partner, UNIDO, and it will be submitted to JEF for implementation to address most of the gaps identified in our NAP. Next slide. Now, we would like to examine some case studies on how data collected inform policy recommendation. And the first case study is on AsGM gold production. If you look at the slide by the left side, you will notice that there is a wide difference between official reported gold production and estimated gold production based on data from the field. For example, in Niger State, officially reported gold production in 2018 was 5.43 kilograms. But from our field estimate, it was about 2,297.18 kilograms. So there's a huge difference. So clearly, the federal government of Nigeria is losing a lot of revenue from AsGM sector due to the high level informality and illicit activities in the sector. And based on this, the following policy recommendations were made: that there's a need for comprehensive assessment to know why previous government efforts to formalize and establish an effective gold buying center failed in Nigeria. And we also recommend that there's a need for effective legal, institutional, and policy framework for the AsGM sector. And there's also a need to formalize the gold and mercury trade and supply chain to enable proper documentation of gold produced and mercury supply and use per annum. So this is one of the advantage of the data we have we gather from the field. That is a huge difference. Next slide, please. These are some of the pictures taken during the field study. This is the first one, gold panning of river sentiment. This is the bottle. This is how mercury is is used in the AsGM. This bottle is about 92 gram bottle, and that's what they use. Next slide. This is the gold mercury amalgam, and you can see the next that open burning of gold is done. Is done openly, very close to the to the nostril of one of the miner. So it's a very dangerous activities. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you. Case study 2 had to do with mercury use. From the data we have here, we can see that the ratio of mercury use to gold production ranges from ratio 1 to 1 to ratio 1.4 to 1, meaning mercury is highly used in AsGM in Nigeria. It's only in one state, Osun State, that mercury is not used. And based on this, data revealed that mercury is being used in all the gold mining states except Osun State. And based on this, policy recommendation as follows: a need for comprehensive assessment of AsGM activities in Osun State to know why mercury is not being used at all. Then we need to build the capacity of AsGM sector for improved gold mining and sustainable gold ore processing techniques that are devoid of inappropriate use of mercury, which will eventually lead to reduction and eventual elimination of mercury use in that sector. We also recommend that there should be a sustainable sensitization program effectively reaching out to miners on the hazard of mercury to human health and the environment, and also on alternative livelihood and technology. Next slide. The case study 3 is on mercury trade. Official data on mercury import into Nigeria, specifically for use in the AsGM sector, is not readily available. However, from information from during the field study, it was discovered that most of the mercury used in AsGM Nigeria come from the neighboring West African countries. But occasionally, we have diversion from the air sector and power sector to the AsGM use. And based on that, it was recommended that further studies should be done to fully understand the trading mechanism and supply chain of mercury trade in Nigeria. And also that all relevant agencies must work together to eliminate illegal trade in mercury within the AsGM sector. Next slide. Case number 4 is on AsGM workforce. Data show that in the AsGM, we have men, women, and children working. And even though it's difficult to provide the exact number of miners engaged directly or indirectly in AsGM activities in Nigeria, it is estimated that over 260,000 miners are directly involved in AsGM activities. Child labor is also predominant in most of the communities because most don't have basic educational facilities, and where they exist, it is either in deplorable conditions or kilometers away. And based on this information, the NAP recommends that periodic creation of awareness on the harmful effect of mercury on human health, especially the vulnerable groups, the women and children, and the environment. We also recommend reviewing the mining laws and regulations to deter children participation in AsGM activities. Another one is improve accessibility to quality education in AsGM communities, and also to empower women population in alternative means of livelihood to divert them from engaging in AsGM activities. Next slide. Thank you. We also collect data on environmental impacts, and we discover a lot of deforestation and destruction of farmland. There is no environmental control on mining activities, and there is a huge pollution of land, water, and air with mercury waste and vapor as a result of activities of AsGM. Therefore, policy recommendations include the need to strengthen national environmental monitoring and enforcement program to effectively cover the AsGM sector, to develop training modules and train AsGM operators on new techniques that reduce or eliminate mercury use in gold processing. We also involve developing guidelines for the management of heavy metal contaminated sites, identify and conduct environmental assessment of AsGM sites degraded and contaminated with mercury containing tailings, and appropriate remediation solutions. There we will recommend continuous sensitization of miners and communities in local languages on the environmental, occupational safety, and health impact of their activities. Next slide. The health risk assessment was also done, and specific issue was highlighted on the highlighted on the slide. But the most important one is that there are inhalation and direct contact with mercury and other hazardous chemicals, such as cyanide, inhalation of dust from as a result of milling of ore. So based on this observation, it was recommended that a comprehensive assessment of mercury exposure through health data gathering in the AsGM community should be undertaken. With that, we should also provide health promotion services in AsGM communities and provide technical assistance to healthcare facilities in AsGM communities to develop treatment protocols. Next slide. So, based on all the observation made during the development of the NAP and the need for the government to bring out change as early as possible, Nigeria government, in collaboration with UNIDO, developed the JEVGO Plus project for Nigeria, and the project is translating data from our data into action. The project is structured to enhance formalization in the AsGM sector, to improve access to finance through financial inclusion of the AsGM and responsible supply chains, uptake of mercury-free technologies so that mercury will no longer be used in AsGM in Nigeria. Then it also involves knowledge sharing, communication, and local capacity building. Next slide. Well, the federal government of Nigeria wants to use this medium to express appreciation to JEF, to UNEP and UNIDO for their unwavering technical and financial support to Nigeria to combat the menace of mercury use in artisanal and gold mining sector of our economy. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Olubunmi, for that presentation. A lot of great details about the NAP in Nigeria and what you've learned from that. So it's great. We have plenty of time for Q&A, and so I see some of you have already put some questions in the chat. That's great. And so Jerome, is it okay if I turn it over to you to moderate the Q&A and take a look at these questions and perhaps send them to the panelists that might want to answer, panelists that might be interested in answering?
Yes, sure. Thanks a lot, Ken, for giving me the floor, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. I'm Jérôme Stucki from UNIDO, where I work in the Department of Environment and more specifically in the Materials and Chemicals Management Division. We have already 3 questions that we received. Thanks a lot for these. The first one specific on Uganda, and I think that's related to the presentation from Gosia. So Gosia, I would like to ask you maybe to answer that question. It's about the data that you indicated for the gold productivity in Uganda. And the question is whether, while you were compiling this data, you were considering that part of the gold being accounted for Uganda could actually be coming from neighboring countries.
Thank you very much, Jerome, and Patience for the question. I think this is a very interesting question. And first of all, I don't have a direct answer now, unfortunately. The gold production that we have extracted is the one that have been reported by the NAP document. And if I mean, I don't have specific answer for Uganda. I'm just saying that if there was specific mention that the gold would have not been produced within the territory, we would make a comment, and we are also looking into adding this comment if there is special situation for a country. For the Uganda, I don't recall now, but maybe Patience actually knows more. He's working there. But it's a important point as well, just to so when we are showcasing qualitative data, that there will be questions sometimes about this. So it's important also that we are trying to document as well if we find a specific situation, as if that, for example, would be a country would report a gold production that part would come not within its territory. That would be a comment definitely to add to understand better the figure presented, the numbers behind the numbers. And maybe actually maybe we can turn also this question to Oluvumi from Nigeria, how they reported their gold estimate, gold production estimate. Maybe that gives us also some indication. Thank you.
Thank you, Gosia, for the answer. Mr. Olusanya, would you like to also provide a brief answer to how the gold production estimations were done for Nigeria?
Thank you. For Nigeria, estimation was done based on the following: the number of working hours per day, gold production per hour. Then we look at the number of hours worked in a day. Then we also ask the number of days you work in a week. And based on that, the estimate was done. So it's basically based on the production per hour, number of hours done per day, and the number of days work per week, which we now turn to per year. Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Olusanya. And I think it's from your explanation, it's clear that this is based on field data, and that based on field data on specific sites, then you made that estimation, and if needed, you extrapolated further to national level data. Maybe going back to, or to complement maybe both statements, it might be worth also indicating that there is a methodology that was used by all the countries preparing their NAP for the baseline estimation of the situation. And I think that's also quite interesting for these NAPs, as it provides a common framework to making this estimation of gold production and mercury use in the sector. Now, moving on to the next question. This one is also addressed, I think, to Mr. Olusanya, and it's also from Patience. You were mentioning during your presentation that some alternative technologies were considered for Nigeria, and the question is, which one of these alternative technologies you find promising?
Thank you. For Nigeria, we have not decided on specific technologies. We have identified quite a lot, because prior to this, during the time we have problem with lead poisoning in artisanal gold mining, a gold method was introduced, and this involved the use of dry, instead of doing dry milling, we were using wet milling. But it was done for some time, but stakeholders did not embrace the methodology further. So what we are doing this time around is to have access to various technology that can be used. Then during during the implementation of the Go Plus project, we will now decide on which specific method we use based on different geographical location. Because in some location they are not using mercury, but we have information that after they have done their after the training that that is left behind are being used by some national, foreign national, to be treated with cyanide to produce further good. So we have not, people have suggested cyanide, but we are opposing it. But we are open to technologies. We have not chosen anyone for now as a country. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for all this complementary information, and I think it's also quite wise not to, from your side, not to have decided on one specific technology, because as I understand it, it's also very much depending on the mineralogy of the ore deposit and the capacity also of the miners. So thanks for that. And maybe just one point of clarification on what you were just mentioning on the lead contamination, because this, I think, is rather specific for a certain area of Nigeria, where actually in the gold deposits there is also lead, high concentration of lead, which means that when the miners were processing the ore to extract the gold, they were also releasing a lot of lead that caused, unfortunately, a dramatic local issue of lead contamination. Thanks again for your answers. We have a question from Chris King on, I think it's also related to your presentation, Mr. Olusanya, related to awareness raising on the danger of mercury, and whether you had already done such a campaign in communities, and if so, what type of engagement approaches you found work the best to raise the awareness on the mercury danger to local communities.
Okay, thank you. On awareness, even prior to our going to the field for data collection, we create awareness in the AsGM community. And we did that through their association. We have Mena Association of Nigeria, from the local level up to national level. So they were involved, and we went into the community to have one-on-one discussion, engagement with the leaders of the mine, because sometimes the miners, they listen more to their leaders. So when we first of all secure the confidence and the trust of the leaders, we went into the community to educate them on the adverse effect of mercury and why there's a need for them to change to alternative method, apart from the effect on their health, but for the sustainability of their business, because we already know that very soon mercury will be scarce, and the earlier for them to change to alternative method, the better for them. And I think they embrace the preaching. So what we need to do now is to upscale the awareness creation so that it will stick. But sometimes when you create awareness and there's no alternative, then people go back to what, when they don't have any alternative means of livelihood, they go back. So that's why we are very hopeful that by the time we start the Go Plus project, we'll be able to showcase alternatives that are even more productive, in terms of gold production than the use of mercury. So on awareness, we are on it, and we hope to upscale it further. It can't be too much, it can't be enough, but we keep on doing what we can do. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Very, very insightful way of increasing awareness, and good luck with the plan also to scale that up. I think you have all the good ingredients building on the local governance mechanism and the traditional way of sharing information. We have two questions that are somehow related, and I think this will probably be best addressed either by Gosia or by Ken. And they are related. Actually, I will start with the second one, to the countries who have already completed their NAPs or started working on these NAPs. And the question is, which one have shown most success in reducing mercury use, and by what sort of percentages? So Ken or Gosia, do you have already some information or answers for that question?
Well, I'll let Gosia take a go at answering that, but I will say that we can also have attendees speak. So if there are any attendees who are from countries that have prepared a NAP and feel like you want to help answer this question about if you've started to implement your NAP, what things are working, you can raise your hand and we can call on you. But it's early days, I would say, for the most part. Gosha, do you have any input to that question?
No, unfortunately, for now, we have only, as I showed you in one of the graphs, the commitments, as in the National Action Plan, the country program, what kind of mercury use percentage and by when they want to reduce it, and some of them even flag that they want to eliminate it by certain date while implementing their strategies. So that would be, I think that will come in the next few years when we start. So the national action plans, actually the first one was only submitted in 2019, if I'm not wrong. So I think we need to wait a few more years from our side to get some better view on that. But that would be really insightful if there is any participant that would like to share any knowledge on that.
Thanks, Gosia. Yes, the floor is open for any intervention on that topic. And I think also from what you presented, Gosia, and what you just clarified, it will be actually quite interesting in some years to check what is the actual results in comparison to the objective that were specified in the national action plans.
Meanwhile, if I don't know, I don't see maybe the hands. Is there somebody? Otherwise, meanwhile, I can maybe just.
I don't see any hands raised.
Meanwhile, if somebody wants to intervene, but meanwhile, I can just maybe say, I think just question from Ken, just to keep maybe kind of also closing remarks. Kind of what would be lesson learned or tips that we could provide for countries that are still working on NAPs based on already what we see from the data on the 16 countries. I think that could be a nice remark, kind of closing also at some point, is that we see the AsGM sector is very complex, and collecting data in often informal, sometimes even linked to illegal activities might be very challenging. It's very difficult to go to the field and get all the information and data that we maybe want to take based on the methodology also that the national teams are starting to collect the data. So very important, I think, is to of course document as much as possible if you get the information, but as well actually to flag the knowledge gaps, what was not possible to collect and why, and what could be done better in the next time you go to the field or you talk to the stakeholders. I think this is very important also, understanding those knowledge gaps and why it was not possible and what could be done better. This is also very important information.
Yes, thank you. Very good point, Gosia. Yes, I mean, as you said, there is a wide sector, very complex. Knowledge gap is an issue. The teams that are preparing these snaps also have to make assumptions. So, yeah, as you just said, it's very important to clarify this in the NAP, so that also then at a later stage when the NAP documents are being used, the data interpretation can be done taking this into consideration. Thanks a lot. I see that Richard requests the floor. Please go ahead, Richard.
Thanks, Jerome. And then thank you also to I believe Christian, who asked the question on whether there's been reductions. It's a very interesting point, and I just wanted to jump off on what Gosia was saying, in that from the Secretariat point of view, there is the reporting, the review requirement every 3 years. And one thing to note as well is that on reflecting on reflection, there might be a possibility, I think, or rather in reviewing the NAPs, particularly when in looking at mercury reductions. I think one must be careful in terms of just copying and pasting existing guidelines to check the reductions. I think, as Gosia said, there has to be a review of lessons learned, an identification and acknowledgement of the gaps. And once that process is done, I think it's worth pursuing, or it's worth reviewing existing guidelines in light of those items, as well as then looking at other approaches in determining reductions, because one doesn't necessarily beget the other. I just wanted to sort of emphasize that point in relation with the reporting requirements and the review of the reports. So there is sort of an opportunity for countries that have developed the NAP to review, as well as implementing agencies to go back and help and assist those countries in reviewing how those NAPs are progressing as well. So thanks for the opportunity, Jerome. Back to you.
Thanks, Richard, for bringing these two important points also on the perspective from the Secretariat on this process. And yes, there will be every 3 years a review of these documents. I think that's a very important point, and the related reporting requirements. So very, very important to underline both the review and the reporting exercises. I do not see any more questions in the chat, nor in the Q&A. So with this, I would like to thank you all for the participation in the event and in the Q&A session. And I'm handing over back the moderation to Ken Davis.
Thanks, Jerome, and thanks again to all the attendees and all the participants. In particular, thanks for your presentations, Gosha and Alabunmi. Thanks for your opening remarks, Richard, and the great facilitation of the Q&A, Jerome. So we'll end here, and we'll end on time, which is great since these side events, we have many more side events today, and this whole week is crowded. So I'll just encourage you to take a look at the exploratory data visualization. Please feel free to share any comments or suggestions or insights on that with us, and be on the lookout for more information that we're going to publish, including some more detailed stories about what the data in the NAP baselines is telling us. And of course, as the NAPs are published, we have 16 now. We'll have many more. These data products will be automatically updated, so we'll have a running compilation and analysis of the NAP data as it comes in. So again, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of this side event week, and goodbye.